I'm just going ahead. Hello, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Simon and welcome to this afternoon's AmCham event on PwC's survey of CEOs around the globe. Every year, PricewaterhouseCoopers conducts a global survey of CEOs of major companies. The annual Global CEO Survey is a flagship PwC survey in which the views of thousands of chief executives around the world are sought. The key objective of the survey is to identify key trends and patterns in a global economy that affect important management decision-making by leaders of the business establishment. As we near the 2-year mark of the pandemic, the global economy has rebounded from the depths of May 2020. The IMF projects global GDP to grow at 4.9% in 2022, a downstick from the 5.9% growth expected in 2021, but that is still formidable. The 4,460 CEOs from 89 countries and territories who responded to this survey display optimism about the continued economic resilience. This year's survey theme is reimagining the outcomes that matter. And to shed more light on the survey, please let's welcome Richard Anson. Richard is a partner at PwC Ghana. Richard Anson, over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure if I can be heard.
I can hear you, Richard.
Great. Good afternoon to you, the fellow panel members, and also to the distinguished members of AmCham. It's an opportunity for us as PricewaterhouseCoopers to engage the market. This is something we actively do, but just share some few highlights on the survey, which I guess you've already alluded to many. Over the past 25 years, PwC has the privilege to gather insights and sentiments of CEOs around the world, to analyze this information and to provide some perspective as to what works most and what is most important to these CEOs. This year's survey in particular, as you may know, is of high sentiments to many, especially coming from the back of the pandemic. We surveyed 4,446 CEOs from 89 countries. 34% of this were coming from public companies, 12% were females, 66% were CEOs of holding or ultimate companies. And this survey was conducted between October 2021 and November 2021. I'll just permit me to project my screen to share some insights from the survey.
Richard, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Someone please notify me if my screen is visible.
Yes, it's visible now.
Great. All right, thanks. So out of the 4,446 CEOs that we surveyed from the 89 countries, what was interesting was that 77% of these CEOs were quite optimistic about the opportunities for growth, especially when it comes to the GDP of their respective countries. I'm sure this is quite surprising, and many will ask, oh, based on all that is happening now, does this still hold true? Yes, it does. Typically, I'm sure if we had the survey between January and now, based on what is happening globally, although there may be one or two changes, but those changes will not be quite significant, especially on the back of many things. I'm sure back in 2021, there was a big issue around supply chain movement, uncertainties and all of that. And as the pandemic comes to an end, that optimism has increased significantly. And I'm sure most CEOs, having crossed 2021, were quite excited about what the prospects hold. Now, let me just show you this on the global level. Now, if you look at it on the continent, the changes is not that significant. In Africa, 85% were still quite optimistic, coming from 68% in 2021. The diagram here shows basically from 2014 up to 2022 and how the dynamics change across Africa, as well as the global survey that was also done. Interestingly, if we go by industry specifics, although the general average was 56%, you realize that those in the private equity sector and technology were the most high optimistic compared to those in the hospitality and automotive industry. Especially, this is also quite understandable, especially because what you realize is that those in the hospitality sector are driven purely by customer contacts and all that. And what the pandemic shows is that there's a lot of restrictions in that space. So it is quite consistent with what we expect. Also on the automotive sector, we all know about the move towards electric vehicles and investments that are required in that sector. Compared to the global average of 56%, you realize that those in the financial service sector are way above what the global averages were. However, if you go into country by country, there will be some changes or dynamics to that effect. Also, we also asked CEOs what were the most concerned to them. And interestingly, 49% indicated that cyber threats were of high concern to them. Second in that rank is health and risk. Also, macroeconomic volatility was also the third most significant concerns to them. Comparing that to the 2021 survey, especially when you look at the African continent, policy uncertainties, i.e. economic challenges were of high concern to them, followed by cyber and then health. If we move down in terms of how the concerns that were raised by these CEOs are spread out on continent by continent basis, you realize that Africa, cyber still continues to be the highest, 50% compared to the global average of 49%. We all know that now remote working is the order of the day. As you continue to use technology, the risks associated with all those heighten the risks of cyber. People are also still concerned about the health and safety of their people and economic volatility that exists in the market. Climate ranked the fourth, followed by geopolitical conflicts and then social inequality. How does this also spread out in the respective industries? Now, on this slide, we've shown the risks on top and the various industries on the side, i.e. on the left side. Now, what you realize is that when you come to cyber, those in the banking, capital market, insurance, i.e. the financial services industry, have or raise significant concerns around the issue of cyber. Whilst if you look at the matters around health and safety, you realize that a significant component of that were those in the hospitality, leisure, and then the healthcare industry. In the area of economic volatility, what you realize is that those in the transport and forest and paper packaging industry are highlighted that as the significant concerns to them. And in the issue of climate, the energy sector or those operating in the energy sector highlighted that as a significant concerns to them. When we move on to, in terms of all this risk, how does the CEOs anticipate their companies could be impacted by this risk over the next 12 months? What we noticed was that when you look at cyber, a lot indicated that it has a significant potential of impacting their sales and the services that they render. Compared to capital raise, which only 17% of those who said cyber was significant to them indicated that would impact their issue around that. Obviously, cyber innovative technology is interlinked, and therefore it was of no surprise that 56% of those who indicated that cyber was a significant risk to them also highlighted that would impact their ability to innovate and use technology. On the health side, sales or revenue was also highlighted, and the issue of the company's ability to attract talent, because obviously anything that is related to health and safety impacts on employees. In the area of macroeconomic volatility, what we noticed was that 69% of the respondents indicated that that has a high potential of impacting their revenues, compared to 45% who indicated that it will attract their ability to attract talent. On climate, quite a significant number also indicated, as 54% indicated that that has an impact on their sales or on their ability to provide services. When we look at the geopolitical conflict, I'm sure what is happening in Ukraine gives an example to this. 79% indicated that that is likely to impact their ability to service their clients and then provide the necessary customer required services. On social inequality, which was highlighted significantly on the African survey in 2021, it was clearly indicated that that also has a significant impact of impacting the company's ability to attract talent. Once you go into the dynamics, obviously, when you look at the US, it is clear that ability to attract talent was high in terms of the concerns. China, obviously, around the geopolitical and governance perspective. Japan obviously saw a lot of opportunity with the Asia Pacific Pac, and then Africa also after played a significant role in some of the optimisms that CEOs or captains of industry indicated that it would, they are optimistic around macroeconomic indicators. In terms of how this break down on the ESG front, we asked our survey that what are some of these non-financial related outcomes, and then how does that impact their long-term corporate strategy, and as well as personal annual bonus or long-term incentive plan. In this area, what we notice is that business outcomes continues to be a significant focus area in terms of corporate strategies. So on the left side, what you see is that significant number of people indicated that customer satisfaction plays a significant role in the company's corporate strategy, as well as compensation plans. While 62% indicated that employee engagement metrics significantly impacts the company's corporate strategy. And then also the personal annual bonus was also 36%. In the area of automation and digitization goals, 54% of the people we surveyed indicated that it impacts their corporate strategy, whilst 23% also indicated that it has an impact on their annual compensation plan. However, if you look at the non-business outcomes, in this case, social and environmental outcomes, the numbers were quite small, whilst 38% indicated that gender representation impact or have a significant role in their corporate strategy. Only 11% indicated that that has been tied to compensation plan of executives. Whilst if you compare that to greenhouse emission and then race, compared to the business outcomes, it's clear that when it comes to the social and environmental outcomes, businesses usually, this do not usually fit into business strategy. And then also, most importantly, annual compensation. PwC also recently did a survey around ESG, and it came out clear that investors or stakeholders are continuously pushing for the social, environmental, and governance issues to be at the forefront of decisions that companies take. And it's also clear from that outcome that stakeholders indicated that they'll be willing to use their voting rights to force companies to take these matters seriously. And also, quite significantly, as AmCham members, I'm sure most of your trading partners are in these developed countries, the US and the rest, and this will be cascading down through the value chains because most companies continue to make promises around ESGs and commitment to ensuring that those commitments or those KPIs flow through the value chain. So don't be surprised if your trading partners begin to ask you for your ESG reports and all that. In the area of net-to commitment, what we noticed was that only 22% indicated that they've made net zero commitment, i.e. what they contribute to total greenhouse emissions against what they take out of the environment. Whilst only 26% indicated that they've made carbon neutral commitment, purely focusing on carbon emission, whilst the net zero focus on general or greenhouse gas emission, including methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon exposures. But also quite interesting, what we saw was that large companies or companies that have huge base usually are very much committed to net zero and carbon neutral. And I'm sure over the past 18 months, you've heard a lot around various companies committing to this. And here in Ghana, even the BOG has issued a directive around sustainable financing, which requires banks to report on certain environmental and social and governance matters. And in that regulations, it asks them to also report on what their customers are doing around that. Because it's very clear that one of the areas where ESG can't be translated down to the entire value chain is to the banking sector. Because they finance a lot of these initiatives. So as a business, it's important that, or as CEOs of industry, it's important that ESG continue to be at the center of the various strategic decisions that are taken, because it's clear that ESG can be seen as either a cost or ESG can be seen as a differentiating factor. And those who see it as a cost would avoid that. However, those who see it as a differentiator, if they continue to invest, they'll be able to set themselves apart, especially around a competitive environment. Regulations are coming periodic by the day, by the years, as various regulators stringently tighten up the reporting strategies around some of these net zero commitments and then carbon neutral commitments. Stakeholders, as I indicated, are also significantly pushing for this to happen. What we also asked around, because it was quite interesting when we looked at those who've made this commitment around net zero.
Hello, Richard.
At a lot.
Yes, okay.
Of them
we lost you briefly.
They haven't, kept this at the back of their mind. Indicated that climate mitigation changes 62%, meeting customer expectations, 61%. That is what will drive them towards making this commitment. Product, service, and innovation, satisfying investor demands. As I indicated earlier, most investors are pushing this down to ensure that various companies that they invest in, especially institutional investors, they take some of these ESG policies seriously. We also asked the question, firms that are lacking to site emission capabilities, how create the following statements regarding why the companies have not made net zero or carbon neutral commitments. 57% of these respondents indicated that they did not produce a meaningful amount of greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore they do not, quote unquote, see the need or the pressure towards moving that. Whilst 55% of those we surveyed indicated that they do not currently have the capacity to be able to measure greenhouse gas emissions. So even if they make those commitments, they do not have the internal capacity to do that. Whilst 52% of our respondents indicated that the companies does not have an established decarbonization approach, whilst 24% indicated that the company is not confident it could be able to meet this carbon neutral commitment, even if they do. But like us, we have already established, it is clear that the push from regulators, the push from institutional stakeholders, push from society in general, and I'm sure if we look at what is happening or what is pushing most of these global drives, we talk about the issue of popularism, mistrust among institutions, and then also asymmetry in the population, compensation or income gaps. And then this has also been accentuated by the rise in technology. So it's very easy for somebody to target a company who is not doing a lot or who is not doing much around social aspect, as social injustice, diversity and inclusion, and accentuate this. And this would have a dire consequence on companies. So as captains of industry, it's important that ESG continue to be at the back of our minds and ensure that as we continue to strategize, and some of the challenges or some of the questions that we've heard was that, yes, there are so many ESG indicators, there are so many areas, which one should be the focus? And what we've always said is that the most important thing is understanding your stakeholders, engaging them to understand what matters most to them, and then ensuring that the KPIs you drive around these ESGs are consistent with what is important to them. That way, whatever report you churn out will be most valuable to them to meet their aspirations. What we also did was to look at various industries and the sort of commitments that it made. What you realize is that those in the extractive industry seems to see carbon neutral commitment as high on the agenda, whilst those in the service industry did not pay much attention to this, aside from regulations and stakeholder push downs. What we also did was to group the various, those who made a commitment into various categories, looking at those who've made science-based or science-aligned net zero commitments. And we asked them what are the greenhouse emission targets, whether they are included in their corporate strategy or are included in their personal bonus plans. What we noticed was that those in category 1, i.e. those who made a commitment, 70% of them have included that in their strategy, whilst only 34% have included that as our tying those net zero commitments. Because there's one thing having a net zero commitment, but as we all know, what gets measured gets done. And therefore, institutional shareholders have seen that the only way we can ensure that our purpose or environment are met is to tie this around employee compensation or executive compensation. We also asked around corporate asset and industry trends which favor value creation. And our question was, how favorable are these factors with regards to your company's ability to create financial value? And how favorable are the following factors with regards to your company's ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Specific assets were highlighted, and then also long-term industry trends as well as regulations. And what you realize is that over time, the aspect around regulations will keep pushing up. And then also it's not quite surprising that the long-term trends or long-term value of companies were behind some of these drives. Probably maybe before I end, and I'm sure there are a couple of questions because we've already shared the survey with members of AmCham, so I'm sure there will be a couple of questions I will come to. But before I end, what we've said is that how do we, or what are some of the things that stakeholders or should consider? It is clear from the various surveys that we've done, especially the 2021 survey, which I just shared the results with you, that CEOs have tremendous challenges with all the risks that they have to manage, as well as the opportunities that would come out of the various uncertainties in the market. However, I recommend a few things. This include active and constructive engagement with stakeholders, as I highlighted, the importance of building trust among your stakeholders, customers, and all that to ensure that you continue to become relevant, identify what matters most to them, and how you can incorporate that into the overall strategy. I've also indicated that industries need to make some of this commitment public. It's of no use having a net zero commitment without making them public, and then having the tools and the system to be able to measure, to manage, monitor, and then report them. And how that can also, you can use incentives to drive changes to ensure that those outcomes that are set do not just become strategies on paper, but it's something that can be implemented or would be implemented. There's also the need for institutions not to operate in silos. Most of these drivers are things that through collaboration and effective collaboration and ensuring that the entire ecosystem embeds that into their strategy would help reduce the cost effects on companies. What we've also said, we've talked about, we've highlighted some 5 R's that we believe that captains of industry should have that around in terms of how they implement or resolve some of the concerns that they've identified. There's a need for institutions to reset conversations, especially with stakeholders, employees, and ensure that they are very much open, not over-promise, because that also goes a long way to derail the trust that has already been highlighted as some of the changes that is driving a lot of the things that are happening in the world currently. It's also important to also rethink incentives and ensuring that what matters most are tied back to incentives to ensure that the culture of organization is tilted or driving the same direction to ensure that the company meets their objectives. Also, there's a need also to recalibrate scales. We've identified that cyber continues to be one of the critical areas that most organizations are grappling with, or most companies are grappling with, especially in the area of around this remote working, cloud computing, and all of that. It's important that companies pay particular attention, recalibrate what skill set they have, identify the gaps, and then put in place measures to be able to deal with them. Then also we need to, or captains of industries need to reappraise their succession plans. This is something that some organizations do not pay particular attention to. But once you've been able to identify the skill set and ensuring that they buy into the ideas or the culture of the organization, it's important that you develop the succession plans and ensure this is clearly communicated so that you do not lose your critical or your key staff. Last but not the least, captains of industry need to reimagine collaborations. Going all alone is usually not the way to go, and ensuring that the strategies that they implement are of most cost effective through effective collaboration. Simon, so I'll pause here, and then I'm sure if there are a couple of questions, I'm happy to highlight. There's a lot to discuss, and time permits, we'll add a lot more.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Richard. I think your breakdown of the survey is very insightful. We are happy with the knowledge. I believe that many of the businesses that are on the call or may have read the survey report really find it extremely useful. Now, just a quick question. Were there any Ghanaian participants, CEOs of Ghanaian businesses, and just for purposes of our audience, if there are any insights that are Ghana of Africa specific that you may want to share?
Right, thanks, Simon. So yes, our survey covered virtually almost all the countries that PwC have presence in, and those that we believe that the inputs were quite critical to have a fair picture of the global position was also included. And when there was a slide that I shared, I will just go back, which is the African slide. Most of the areas that were highlighted vis-a-vis were quite in sync with the global picture. However, the percentages would vary depending on the country. So in Africa, in particular Ghana, cyber continued to be, or cyber was one of the critical areas that were highlighted. Policy uncertainties was also highlighted, and I'm sure the evidence of it has been outlined in various forums, in various conversations. I'm sure the issue of benchmarking survey as to whether or not it's going to be abolished or not created a lot of uncertainties for businesses. Policies around taxes, whether or not they were going to implement, also created some kind of uncertainties for respondents. Now, if you look at the area of talent, I'm sure the what we call the Great Resignation has hit quite a number of companies, because what you realize is that for companies, as your employees continue to engage in the office, do tasks together, you create some form of a cultural bond, and therefore sometimes it makes it not so easy for employees to leave. But however, when those activities that are done together is put on hold as a result of the pandemic, i.e. people working remotely, not having the chance to work together collaboratively, seeing one another, engaging one another. It then makes it quite easy for employees to disengage and then also move on, especially when the communication coming from the top, i.e. as captains of industries are not that clear. Technology has helped improve this. Most of the things that could be done as group kind of tasks can still be done through some form of various technology platforms. It still doesn't take away the effect that face-to-face interactions have. So currently what you see is that most organizations have started doing some form of collaborative or a hybrid kind of working style that still ensure that the various protocols are adhered to working remotely, and then also have some time in groups to also work together in the office or various locations of their job. So from the Ghana perspective, the macroeconomic environment was highlighted, cyber was highlighted, talent was highlighted, and then to some extent, issues around social injustice, i.e. Diversity and inclusion was also some of the things that came through from the survey.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard, for the breakdown of the Ghana perspective from this particular survey. I believe that we have received enough information from you. I was hoping that people would come up with questions, but it's apparent that people were more prepared to listen than actually, come up with more questions for you. So just wrap up before we go. What should we look forward to 2023, the 2023 survey? Are there plans underway? What would be the topic, and what should businesses expect from Pricewaterhouse in 2023 survey? Over to you, Richard.
Right, thanks, Simon. PwC, as purposes, building trust in society and solving important problems, would continue to provide insightful research, insightful surveys, insightful publications to captains of industries to ensure that as they go through or navigate through this milky or this ever-evolving economic environment, ever-evolving areas of or territories of operations, they have all the tools and the skills to be able to navigate through. And our doors are always open. And I'm sure if there are any specific areas that any of your participants or members of AmCham want to engage us on, we are happy to sit and then provide that insight. But what to look out for in 2022, we'll be doing another survey specifically focusing on Africa. We have also done a couple of surveys around ESG, which we will share with you for onward distribution to your members. We've done a survey around executive what matters most to boards, looking at the compensation plans around, and then also looking at ESG matters. We've also done a report around going public, IPOs, what stakeholders need to look out for. Our banking highlight survey would come on in 2022. Also, we asked people also to look out for budget highlight survey, tax facts and figures, and a lot more. So what I will say is that they should watch out for this space. There'll be a lot more that will be coming out from PwC. Also, they should also know that our doors are always open, and should they wish to engage us on any of these matters, we are more than happy to engage them. In our 2022 CEO survey, we'll still do it this year. It's something that we do annually, and we do not intend to stop that. We'll follow up on some of the trends that we saw and how that have changed, moved on, or been modified. What I would say to captains of industry is that yes, the crisis or the pandemic is somewhat coming to its tail end. However, we should always continue to have an evolving approach, continue to build trust with our stakeholders, employees, customers, regulators, and then also ensure that we do not overpromise, understand our stakeholders, what is most important to them, how can this important or items that are important to our stakeholders, how can it be incorporated into the strategy of the business? And then also, how can that be linked towards compensation? And most importantly, how do we recalibrate our skills? How do we assess the skills gap? And how do we close those gaps and ensure that we provide our staff, employees, the various tools they need to be able to navigate the current environment in which we operate in.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Richard Ansel, for this insightful presentation to members of the American Chamber of Commerce and the US business community. We want to extend our deepest appreciation to you and the team at PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for always being on hand to help us. All right, members on the call, until we come your way with the next webinar, we appreciate your time for joining us this afternoon to discuss this important 25th PwC Annual Global CEO Survey Digest. We'll see you on the next call, and take care, and God bless all of us. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.